Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everyone is doing okay this morning. I'm going to have a series of shows. I may not keep this one all that long because I'm not sure there's much meat on the bone. But I always say that, and it's usually famous last words. But I'm going to try to keep that this time, and I'm going to try to keep this to around 10 to 12 minutes. That being said, before I start, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always help the content out through Patreon if you dig what I'm putting down. It always helps the show, especially with the tax by YouTube. Also, be on the lookout for Ben Norton. He's going to be on the show coming up. We're still trying to narrow down the time. And Vanessa Beasley, journalist, she's going to come on the show and talk about Syria. That should be an awesome interview. She's been there as an independent investigative journalist, so that should be great. And on Monday at 8 a.m., I'm going to be on Fault Lines Radio with Ken Stranahan and Garland Nixon. I've seen them. It's funny. I've seen both of these guys, but I didn't know that they were in D.C. So I'm actually going into the radio station in D.C. I'm going to get up ridiculously early and drive to the radio station. So that should be an experience, seeing I've never been to a radio station before. That should be fucking fascinating. I probably can't drop F-bombs, but that's okay. I can not curse when I need to. I'm going to make a point, and I'm going to make an argument. And I think the argument is right. Otherwise, I wouldn't make the argument. Democrats, oh, Jesus Christ, Wesley. I saw that out of the corner of my eye. Wesley, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Look at my basic argument. The Democratic Party has effectively not just failed, but they've lost the credibility of the left itself. Meaning they've utterly destroyed what it means to be the left in any real context of the American minds, and in doing so undermine and to some degree destroy themselves in the process. I had a conversation with my nurse. I've known him for about 10 years, and in this conversation it's funny, we're talking about Clinton's emails, and it's so weird, man. I've gotten to the point where I feel like I end up having more in common not in common, the ability to talk to Trump supporters better than Hillary supporters. Because I gotta be honest, Hillary supporters are in a cult. They are odd and weird in the way that they go about and say things. There's one of the Hillary supporters saying that Hillary Clinton should run again in 2020. It's amazing. But she wouldn't do it because she loves her country too much. This is cultish behavior. At the very least, Brian is a Trump supporter to some degree. I mean, he's not fully anything, but he identifies more so as libertarian. And we were talking about Hillary Clinton. We were waiting for the IG report to come out, and both of us were like, yeah, that woman is going to get perp walked. And Brian was like, I am absolutely waiting for that report. And we were talking about this thing of corruption in government. And he says, you know, Donald Trump is going to clear out the swamp. And at that point, all of the agreeing that we've had up to this point fell out the window, and my mouth hit the floor. And I'm like, certainly you don't believe that. And he's like, yeah, I think he's going to clean it out. I said, Brian, you're talking about a billionaire. You honestly don't believe he cares about your interests. And he says, no, he says, I don't think he cares about my interests. He says, but I think, and he starts thinking about it, and he says, I'm sick of the way things are going. I'm sick of the way things are going. He said, there's nobody functioning down there for Brian, and because there's nobody functioning there for me, I'm sick of the way things are going. And I said, I understand. You're talking about throwing a brick through the window of the establishment. Yes. I said, you're frustrated by the process. Yes. And what I tried to appeal to him and try to make the point to him that there's a difference between government, the edifice itself, this kind of mental fiction that we kind of organize ourselves around in this kind of mental way, versus the people who run it. There's a difference in those things. You may ascribe some level of either positive or negative neutrality to government itself, meaning the edifice itself, the idea, how it's arranged or how it's organized and set up. There may be certain incentives that are built into it that push people in a particular direction. So you may ascribe some value to just the edifice by itself with nobody manning it. But the issue that I think Brian has is the people who run it. Now, I try to make the distinction to him because I wanted him to realize that it's not so much that government programs are a problem. It's essentially if you put somebody in government who doesn't care about government, well, you're going to get a shitty government program. And if you have people in government that are attacking those things, then you're going to have problems with those programs. The issue is the people, not necessarily the edifice itself. He agreed with me. I won that point. As we moved into it, I kind of made this point to him that what if we were $20 trillion in debt, but you had healthcare, you had education, you had high-speed rail going from point A to point B, your college was paid for, meaning you wouldn't have to put that money out for your kids. Would you feel the same way? And he said, no, I don't think I'd feel the same way. Meaning, the reason that he feels this way, and I suspect the reason that a lot of people feel this way, is not seeing value for what takes place. As he said, there's nobody there working on behalf of me, so why should I care? In which case, I'm going to put this libertarian in because there's nobody there working for me, so why should I care? I understand this is magnificently selfish, but nevertheless, that's the perspective that's taken. I suspect that a lot of those people looked at what has been taking place from the standpoint of our politics and said, none of this is there for me. Even the party that is supposed to be there for me is not there for me. The party with the philosophical interests, or you can say this kind of momentum of representing the interests of the workers, the 99%. You're talking about essentially the FDR mold that was set when FDR was in that office, and this kind of momentum that has taken place. But at some point the brakes were hit and it's just kind of coasted with this belief that these robotic parroting of the rhetoric without necessarily anything to back it up, that the people themselves would be so stupid and so hollow that they wouldn't necessarily ever see it, that the disparity would never get opened up between the perception of things versus the reality of those things. Well, not so much. Yeah, I guess my point is, yes, that perception has opened up. That gap has opened up. People have started seeing the reality of it. And there's a fundamental problem here with the Democratic Party that has essentially destroyed its own brand. I mean, think of what Brian is saying. If there were actual things that I can show that were tangible, then I can show that this is value to me. But this is no value to me because I can't show those tangible things. This kind of radical incrementalism that the Democratic Party has gone with, based on the people who are putting money in their pockets and who fund them, has essentially destroyed them. We have no representation for workers in this country. No full-throated representation of workers. Ultimately, you have a Democratic Party that has been pushed forever, pushed, continuously pushed, and the entire time, as they supposedly needing to be pushed, screaming, we're for the poor, we're for the workers, we're for the 99%. What does it look like for somebody who's somewhat on the left, who trends to the left? Now, you had 20% or 30%, how many ever, that used to vote for Obama, turned around and voted for Trump. Let's assume those. I'm not talking about the hardcore racists. I'm talking about people who trend, can flip both ways. And I'm making this point that in the way that things have trended, they don't see value. And these people look at what is taking place and they say they're trying to curry favor with identity politics, and they're trying to take advantage of blacks and Hispanics. That's what they say. And by the way, that is to some degree true. That's true. At least I think it's true. Democratic Party looks at blacks, Hispanics, and labor and say you have nowhere else to go. Meaning you're a captive audience. We can sit here and sing all night, and you can listen to whatever we sing because you're a captive audience. We've barred the door because if you leave, the monsters are going to get you. They're hanging right outside. You have nowhere else to go. This is the dynamic that has been playing out. You have no one who is a full-throated representation of workers in this country, and that is somewhat of a problem. Now, Brian, for the moment, looks at this and says, you guys are being had. The Democratic Party is screwing you over. Now, he has no illusions to some degree about the Republican Party. He doesn't consider himself a Republican. But he looks at it and says, between the two, those guys are lying flagrantly through their teeth. And again, the premise of this is not so much that he's against government per se. He's against the party because he believes the party lies. Radical incrementalism. Bill Clinton comes into that office, NAFTA. Obama comes into that office. And in this moment where this guy's supposed to be hope and change and this transformative president and this is going to get something done, he passes a right-wing healthcare plan. It's falling apart at the seams with rates skyrocketing. And this utopian, weird idea that you can, for some reason, have healthcare insurance companies still be in the mix. These guys making millions of dollars. You can have drug companies still in the mix, largely not necessarily mandated by any kind of cost restrictions. And yet, you can have this utopian thing where patients get this awesome value. The patient, the person, was not the center of that. Which kind of gets us across this idea of why on earth is this Democratic president using a right-wing healthcare plan in order to deal with healthcare? Does he believe that the Republican Party is the party that you go to for healthcare programs? My point here is, this is the perspective of what the right sees when they look at the Democratic Party. And they look at this and they say, my rates are going through the roof. He passed this stupid-ass healthcare plan, and this is... They don't feel that way about Social Security. They don't feel that way about Medicare, but those plans work. Look, my point is, the radical incrementalism has not done the Democrats well. It's done you a disservice. And not just done you a disservice. When they look at you, they associate what you are with what the left is, which damages the brand of the left that much more. If workers had a party to represent their interests, when Bill Clinton started to take all that money, you can even make a point of Carter, but definitely with Bill Clinton, when Bill Clinton took all of that cash, I think he was the first president to outrage Republican, and went to the right, full-throated to the right. And because he was a Democratic president, he was allowed leeway in doing those things, making it look as if this is okay and this is what it means to be on the left. That same Bill Clinton tells labor, you have nowhere else to go. You're stuck. What are you going to do? Those other guys are maniacs. And in that moment, the power dynamic between the Democratic Party and everyone else shifted to one of you need us, not the other way around. And that is not necessarily the way you want to go about your political affairs. When the public balked at this arrangement in this election, 2016, the Democratic Party responded in the most undemocratic of ways by just cheating. They cheated one of the candidates. Now, they cheated one of the candidates because the public itself got sick of that idea of you have nowhere else to go and started to run in a crew around a different type of organizing itself, somebody who was actually full-throated, hope and change, but actually meant it. Imagine what would take place if Bernie Sanders becomes the definitive left, and all of those notions that the Democratic Party has held up as this is the only way we can go about our affairs. Radical incrementalism is the only way we can go about our affairs. We must pay attention to labor. We must love capitalists. We must protect the bankers. We must, and you find all that to be a lie. What happens? That ideology to some degree implodes. and they're fighting tooth and nail in order to keep that ideology intact. This Democratic Party going so far as to fight for superdelegates, going so far as to put their thumb on the scale all throughout this country, screaming that they're going to have this kind of, they're now lefties all of a sudden, that all of them are progressive, and that they're going to have a better deal, whatever the hell that means, while stopping the people who would actually implement that better deal. You can understand that other people looking at this balk at this behavior, with them screaming Russia as opposed to obfuscate from their own failures. Me taking a shot at them in no way makes the Republican Party any better, by the way. I'm just making this point of how lefties, or people who trend to the right, see that party, and part of the reason that there's such a disconnect between what they see and why they don't jump on board. Fact is, fighting with this idea of corruption, seeing this corruption as one of those things that both sides hate, but also fighting on this thing of actually meaning something, having real values, pushing for something that goes beyond this just radical incrementalism and meaning it. Part of your issue is this issue of trust and that lack of trust that's been created in the way that you've gone about your affairs. You're not the left. You can only look across the pond and find that out. You've pulled an amazing con on the American public, and the problem is that the American public has started to balk, and they've started to notice. And this uprising that you've had, where all of these people have pulled themselves out of the party, where you lose 1,100 seats and you lose to a reality show host, that has to burn. But that is trying to get something across to you that you fundamentally don't necessarily want to get. Again, DCCC putting his thumb on the scale all throughout the country, telling some candidates they should get out of the race because we've already chosen that person. You're missing the point. And these things are hurting you from the standpoint of the people who you want to get on board. Radical incrementalism is eating your party alive. You've made a deal, a Faustian bargain, with a bunch of plutocrats, believing that the only way you can run in those races is by raising a huge amount of money from them, carrying favor with them, while at the same token losing a great deal of support from the people who you're supposed to represent, because those people recognize that you are working for them, meaning not us, them, the people who you're getting the money from. You've lost trust. You've burned your brand. That's not because of Trump. That's purely, entirely because of you. So, just saying. Let's see. Oh, wow. DC Travel Fund. Ah, thank you, Wesley. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. Balthazar 228. Rachel Maddow thinks Trump is a Russian bot, while she herself is being paid to talk nonstop about Russia. She's literally Russian bot. Balthazar, Democrats think FDR Dems equals funding donor relation Democrats. I wonder if D is so toxic as a brand label now that they are actually pushing voters away. They are. Bill Clinton definitely came into the Oval Office. Oh, Balthazar. Bill Clinton came into that Oval Office. If not voting was a party, they would be the most popular in the United States electoral history. And look, this is the other thing for that, right? Bill Clinton came into the Oval Office. That's hilarious. That's funny. You have 30% of the public that identifies as a Democrat, if I'm not mistaken. The behaviors that you take, meaning going after corruption, actually meaning for things. And by the way, I have no belief that the Democratic Party is going to, acknowledge any of this. They're going to think I've lost my mind. But I would guarantee you that the independents, some of the Democrats themselves, and of course, that 20% that floated to Trump would agree with me. There is something fundamentally wrong with the way the party has been going about its affairs. And beyond that point, there is no one representing labor. Nobody. Nobody at all. You have two parties that are governed by plutocrats. If you remember, The Republican Party was told, pass that tax cut, or else. This tax cut that put $1 trillion on the back of the American public, while at the same token giving these plutocrats massive amounts of cash that they immediately stuffed into their pockets, while it was sold as we're giving money to the lower class. This was nonsense. This idea of trickle down, that you're going to give these guys money and they're just going to make a job or something. They will make a job if they need a job. Beyond that point, not so much. They put their money in the stock market, they put their money in their pocket, and a little tiny trickle went to the workers. Tiny trickle. The Democratic Party was told by Klobuchar to shut up about class, and they promptly shut up about class. You literally had the plutocratic class telling the political class what they should talk about. And because you only have two parties, how difficult is it to capture the two parties? I mean, so what if you put a few $1 million into a process if you're going to get $1 billion back in policy and tax cuts? I mean, shit, man. Did you see Ocasio-Cortez? Oh, right. And Kroll debate worth doing a video on. I've been looking for that video. If you know whether I can find that video, let me know. I haven't been able to find it. I heard about it immediately after they had just finished it, and the link that they gave for the most part had been finished on Facebook. I think it was a Facebook link. I have been looking for that video. If you know where it is, please let me know. Please let me know. 40 years later, trickle down is still thoroughly disproven, but they still act like it's real. John Smith, they act like it's real because they use that to scare the working class. There's a certain false consciousness that goes in the way that we go about our affairs, meaning workers. And they tell them, hey, if you give these rich people more money, despite them having a massive amount of money as is, and don't give you any of that money, for some reason, somehow, they're going to give you some of this money because this money is somehow different than the other money that they already have. You have enough wealth to get rid of poverty 7 times over. We just don't do it. The private class, or you could say the bourgeois, they're not interested in making jobs, only if they need to make a job. Jobs are expensive to them. Now, if they knew they were going to get a profit back on it, yes. But from the standpoint of creating jobs, they don't give two shits about creating jobs. That's not their job to do that. I mean, the private sector is not necessarily there to create jobs. They're there to make money. Those things are little machines. You will be sorely mistaken, and you will sorely misunderstand their incentives. If I needed somebody to do my videos, I would get somebody to edit my videos if I thought that it would give me a return on my profit. But I wouldn't necessarily do it just for shits and giggles because it would be expensive to do. It's the same thing anywhere else. It's fundamentally bogus, and yet they push it, but they push it for obvious reasons. It's like, hey, we can just say it's trickle down, and we'll just push this shit. Yeah, it's insane. Poverty stalks the land as the stock market blooms to record highs and the homelessness haunts the land. But they never see a combination of those things. Look, my thing is, our society is weird. It's utterly bizarre. Work is a pain in the ass. You would think that you would work to the degree to make sure people have the basic needs, and then from that point on, let people go about their ways. But we don't do that. I mean, we literally work so other people will have massive amounts of profit. And we say, well, that's just the way the system is. That's great. And you would have people who would attack labor unions saying that those people make too much, as opposed to, why don't you make as much as we make? Like, it's so bizarre. Like, the way we organize ourselves. Look, if the private class is unwilling or unable to deal with the number of people who need work and to hire those people at adequate wages, fine. So what? Free job guarantee. Take a portion of their salary and taxes and set up a federal jobs guarantee. you're going to get a kickback in the wages that you're paying those people. And just by virtue of paying those people a decent wage, you automatically force private enterprise to actually match those wages. You also stop this weird thing of allowing private enterprise to dictate how many people are able to work in your society. Why would you ever allow that to be solely rest in the hands of private corporations that have no business or no necessary want of hiring labor? That's fucking insane. I just find all of this weird in the way that we organize ourselves and the odd ways in which we talk about this stuff. Jamal is no about the Parento. Yeah, I like Parento. I like Michael. I like Parento. I've binge watched several of his videos. Parenti. No, it's not Parento, it's Parenti. Easy credit suppresses wages. Black power don't rely on Bernie. He's not going to do that. A dingo ate my baby. Rugged individualism is where the warped ideas come from. It's that, yeah, but that doesn't exist. There's no such thing as rugged individualism. That's right-wingers convincing poor people that, oh, shit, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as rugged individualism. You have essentially right-wingers that have convinced poor people to take on policies that help right-wingers or the rich people that's not within their class. Stop taking perspectives of a class that has no interest in you. And Trump supporters, by the way, immigrants. He's throwing people into concentration camps and throwing their kids into cages. Immigrants are not your problem. I'm sorry, it's not. Immigration is not the problem. I mean, ultimately, you're talking about this thing of work. People coming into the country in order to get away from work. And oftentimes, people fear this immigration because right-wingers fearmonger, saying they're going to take your jobs, they're going to take your jobs, they're going to take your jobs. Federal jobs guarantee, fine. And beyond that point of the federal jobs guarantee, you're concerned that they're going to get a job that could go to you. But who's hiring them? Like, you always hit the lower guy on the totem pole. There's a plutocrat that is giving them a job, who's saying, here's a wage packet. And instead of giving it to you, because he has to pay you 15, he says, I'm going to give it to you because I'm going to give you 8 or 9. Now, you dislike that. But that person is just trying to put food on their table, where the plutocrat is just trying to make an extra buck. And you get mad at the guy at the bottom. I always get so annoyed by that. It's so fucking weird. I'm not allowed to, Pat. I've used them the same day. What's happening, Trudy? Mr. X. Vegan for the planet. Actually, I beg to differ. Immigration is a problem. It's not that they are taking jobs. It's that corporations are using them to pay very, very low wages. That's what I said. But that's not... What is the rate of people coming into the country right now? I would almost guarantee you that number is nearly 0. Now, and I'm talking about that as somewhat of a net number. So yeah, they may catch people coming across the border, but I would wager that number is massively depressed and is nowhere near this thing of, oh my God, we're being overrun by immigrants. Now, that being said, that problem there is not the immigrant itself. You're talking about somebody hiring them. I mean, if you give them jobs, how are you getting pissy at the immigrant for coming here? Perfect example of rugged individualism is Liberia. Kathy Lloyd. Thank you, Kathy. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Guys, it does help the show, believe it or not. I've gotten to the point where I've started to expand this show. And my wife has given me, her and I have talked about it, and she says, go for it. She says, I respect you for trying to make this into a real thing. Go for it. So, I appreciate it. It all helps to expand the show. Forsaking companion. Have some things going on, but hanging in there. How have you been, Trudy? I hope things are going okay for you. TYT is going fine. Oh, don't say anything, Gordon. I haven't got to that yet. I have the article up. I was told about it like a day or two, like at the moment that it happened. And somebody said, hey, they've just fired Nomi. And apparently, and said they fired multiple people. It's not just her. But I couldn't find any articles about it. At that point, it had literally just happened. And then that's when an article came out about it today. But I'm going to tell about it. Yeah. I'm going to talk about it on the very next video. That's going to be my next video. That's going to be the next video. Oh shit, I fucked up the show, and there goes all the super chats. No. Vice is a propaganda arm of the CIA. They fired Nomi, and they fired Hannah. They fired Hannah too. All right, let's go into that, because I do want to talk about that. So I am going to restart this. I'm going to be back in like literally 5 minutes, and we can talk about it. Because that is pretty fucking fascinating, and I do want to discuss that one, and I think there's more legs on that one than this one. So I'll be back in like 5 minutes. Don't go anywhere. I will be back in 5 minutes. I promise this will not be flexible time. I will be back in 5 minutes. I think this will be an awesome discussion. The firing of a bunch of people on TYT and why. And by the way, I tweeted debate at you on the New York One website. Immigration is a net negative. The entire immigration process is obscene. People who, yes, I knew it. So that's kind of my point. Like, this idea of an immigration issue, and it's a negative. It's a net negative. Yes, you may have a certain number of people coming into the country, but the net negative thing is there are just as many going out. It's nonsense. And the idea that you're attacking immigrants when they're coming here because people are hiring them, I mean, come on. It's like, yeah, we're going to make it hostile for the immigrant, but not for the people who are hiring those immigrants. It's like, that's obscene. And again, I make this point that if you're scared that they're going to take your jobs, and if they're going to drop the wages themselves, that's the capitalist that's doing that. That's a person who's giving them a pay packet and saying, here, thank you for doing this job at half the cost of the American. Just saying. All right, I'm going to end this here. I will be back in 5 minutes. Baltazar, thank you very much for that fact check. On the spot fact check. All right, guys, be right back.